Here's a topic I get asked about: how to convince your wife to buy a sailboat. This is Family Sailing Vlog, and you can subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Let's go. Okay, so in this video, I want to talk about how to convince your wife to buy a sailboat. So the first thing I want to say is you don't really want to convince your wife so much as have it be a shared decision. So how do you make that happen? Well, first of all, if you are the guy, which I know many of the people who watch these videos are, you may have had this dream for sailing for a long time. But think about it from the wife's perspective, who hasn't actually gone sailing. Like in my case, I never went sailing as a kid. I had never stayed on a sailboat before we bought our sailboat. And I wasn't sure if it was something I wanted to invest my time, my money, and my husband's attention into. So how do you kind of make that transition together collectively to go from a dream to a reality? So in our case, the first thing we did when we started thinking about buying a sailboat was we watched some sailing things together, whether it was vlogs or TV shows that involve sailing, just anything to kind of get me to know and interested. Mike had told me early on that he wanted to make sailing part of our life. I didn't necessarily think that that meant buying a sailboat and going on these massive trips on it. I wasn't sure what that meant for our future. So it was sort of a transition point to go from, thinking about it, having the idea, and then actually turning it into a collective dream. So this convincing part, it wasn't so much about convincing, it was about talking through what would be the benefits of sailing for our family. And I think what really solidified it for me was when Mike talked about, from his perspective, how this, what this meant to him, what his dreams were, how this was part of his identity. So that really serious kind of frank conversation where I got to hear from his heart, that made a huge difference for me. It no longer was just sort of a random hobby on the side. Mike is into a lot of things. He's had a lot of hobbies. We have an airplane in our garage, as an example. He has a lot of interests. But what made this different, what made the sailing idea different, was he really spoke from his heart, and we talked about how this was part of his vision for our future and what it meant to him, what it really meant, his identity as a sailor, what it meant to be able to go on the water and do this, and that it was a true priority. So until we had that kind of really detailed heart to heart, rather than it just being Mike off in his room watching YouTube, looking at sailing stuff, and it became a collective dream for us, that is, that convincing part, it was less about convincing and more about me seeing how important this was to him. And as a wife, that made a big impact on me. So the other thing we did was we went to the Annapolis Boat Show probably about 4 times before we actually bought our own sailboat. And that was really good. Even though we weren't buying a brand new boat, even though, we weren't, the catamarans that we saw there were brand new and really expensive, like over $1 million. That was not really for us. But we got into the spirit of sailing. The feeling of the boat show was exciting. The smell of the boats. That was not something that was on my radar as a wife. And after going to the boat show, I got excited about that, and that became sort of a fall thing for us to do together. And it was sort of on the way to and from the boat show where we had this journal. We wrote in it some ideas on what it would look like. That really, shared the dream for me, sort of solidified what it might look like for us to have this boat opportunity together. So, when we ended up buying the boat, I was pregnant and I was actually on bed rest. So I couldn't even go on the boat. I had never slept overnight on the boat. We bought this boat, which for me was sight unseen. So Mike went out and spent a week on the boat with the previous owner, which was incredible. But yeah, it was sort of like a really big risk in a way for me, because it was something I hadn't seen or touched or felt or heard. But by that point, this was sort of 4 years into the actual planning of it, we made it a reality. And I think there was a point in time for me as the wife, because I'm a type A personality. I like to get things done, where I was like, we've either got to do this or we got to stop talking about it, because I don't like having something hanging over our head that's this dream that we'll never do. I'm not one to plan like 50 years ahead. I'm not sure if I have 50 years left alive now, but sometimes people plan for their retirement, and I don't want to think that far ahead. I want to think about what is our plan for the near, short and medium term future. And if it's just something I'm going to spend my whole life, like 30 years planning for, that is way too long of a time frame for me. So it was either, listen, if this is really a dream, let's make it happen, or let's, stop talking about it, because I don't want to waste my time watching all these YouTube videos and learning about it if we're not actually going to make it happen. And I mean, that's why we decided to buy a used boat instead of buying a new boat, was because there was no possibility that we could have $1 million to buy a sailboat within the 5 to 10 year period of when we were thinking about this. This was about 5 to 10 years ago. I think in reality, even if we'd waited this long, I don't think we would have ever done it, to be honest. It was just too far ahead and too much money, too much of an investment. So yeah, that really made a big difference, was, starting to take actions and then turning it into a reality instead of just something we were talking about. So those are just some thoughts on what things might, be of interest to your wife in terms of wanting to learn about sailing. I have to say, I was never going to become like a full-on sailing wife the way that maybe some wives are. Sailing is not something that's like something I did as a child. I'm not going to turn into the sudden, sailboat woman who's going to take the boat out alone with a bunch of friends. I'm not really captaining the boat, and that's okay. I am happy with my role, with what it is. On this boat, Mike is the captain, and I'm not. And in other areas of our life, I'm the captain, and that's fine. So we have a bit of give and take. So that was kind of also a negotiation, sort of learning those roles. And then, of course, for me, because we were starting to have a family at that time, learning how the kids were going to get involved in this sailing opportunity was also important to me. Figuring that out, how was it a shared vision for our family, was really important. So it couldn't just be Mike's vision. It couldn't just be our vision as husband and wife. It had to become a family vision as well. So we brought the kids to the boat show, even when they were toddlers, and we did this stuff together and talked about it. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts. Love to hear your questions down below. If you have any thoughts or comments on how you've been trying to convince your wife, or how any questions you have. I think for me, one of the important things was, don't put so much pressure on me to be a certain thing in this sailing dream. Like, I wasn't sure what I was going to like about it. As it turns out, for me, the nature part and the wildlife part is where my passion is. I love bird watching from the boat. I actually rediscovered my love of bird watching, which I had as a child and kind of forgot that it was so important to me. I rediscovered that in the Chesapeake Bay and on the Delaware River, when I spent a lot of time with my binoculars right here at the front of the boat, enjoying the beautiful waterfowl that we saw all along the C&D Canal, that kind of thing. So, and now for me here in this new kind of chapter, it's about seeing whales, which we just spent a whole day doing. And Mike, laboriously drove around, following different spouts in different directions. And we did get to sail. We had the sails up quite a lot of the day, but that was maybe not his idea of the most amazing day ever, but it was what was important to me. And so you don't necessarily know going into it, at least as the wife who's not kind of aware and 100% committed to the idea, you don't know what your role might be or what your passions might be. But as you invest in it, you do start to learn what those are, and you find them and they come to you. So yeah, so hope that's helpful, and I hope that if it's your dream to sail and to buy your own sailboat, I hope that you follow through and persevere and make it a shared dream and find a way to make it happen, and not just think like 20, 30 years into the future, because sometimes those dreams fall apart and they don't happen. And I'm a big believer in not being a tire kicker and figuring out a way to make it work.
Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.